All right, welcome to my top 10 books of 2023. It's my birthday, so I'm going to post it today so I can spread joy of these books. Because even though I did not get as many favorites of all time this year as I normally do in a year, these books are still worth shouting about. And it's an interesting list. I think there's a little something for everyone on this list because normally I have a top 10 fantasy, top 10 science fiction, but this year that didn't happen. 4 of these books are sci-fi and fantasy, and then the rest are literary fiction. There's a romance, there's some horror. It's a real hodgepodge. I guess my reading, I could not have predicted what would resonate with me this year as I was reading, obviously. But these are the faves. I did have surprises and runner-ups earlier this week, and I had on Monday kind of reflecting on the year month by month, so kind of giving a holistic view of my year, and I think it's generally okay, even if I don't have as many favorites. I can't make all of those different lists that I normally do. But these are standouts, so let's get into them, starting with Lone Woman by Victor LaValle. I love how he handles horror, dark fantasy. Like, that's his space. Like, he has traditional horror stuff, but he also kind of does dark fantasy, and I think for some people it's jarring, because the 2 books that I've read, full-length books, I've also read a novella, but I'm going to focus on the books, kind of do like, here's the horror section, and then here's the dark fantasy section, and I kind of pieces them together. Like, it's still one whole story, but I feel like there's a tone change that for me works really well, that I don't get bothered by it, but I can totally see why people do. So that exists here. I guess that's what I want to say. Like, if you're someone who's like, oh, I love the horror elements, and then you're going to be sad when they leave, they might leave a tiny bit, or like I said, shift into more dark fantasy, and vice versa. If you're like, I really only like dark fantasy, I'm not big on horror tropes. But I think he's still worth trying because I think he does it really well. And also, this book in particular really highlights how good he is at weaving in themes and community, and just like, how he surprises you. Even though he's doing stuff that, like, if you are familiar in this genre, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's not surprising, that reveal. But it's not about the reveal. It's about the payoff after the reveal. And it's about when he reveals it. Like, you might know what the reveal is because you're just like, well, I've read horror before, or, like, I've seen this movie. But he will put it in a spot where it's like, but that's usually revealed at this percentage of the book, not here, so now what are we going to do? I think that's where the tension can really be. And like I said, for me, a twist is fun. But it's only as fun as how much of the repercussion is on the story, and it should definitely be more leaning on that. Lone Woman is about all of these women in Minnesota, and they're all women who are not tied to men. And we focus primarily on Adelaide, and she is leaving her home. The opening scene is her basically putting her family farm on fire with her parents in it, who are a bloody mess, and she's leaving with a mysterious box, and you're like, what has happened? That's the opening. That's the cold open. And you go from there, and she's going to homestead. She's a Black woman homesteading in Minnesota. There are other women. There's obviously, like, a lesbian couple. There's a single mom. Like, all these women. And it's also just survival in this time period because it's historical fantasy as well. It's like a historical horror fantasy, which I love. And I love homesteading stories. I think there's a lot of mess to go along with that because of, like, the complex nature of how, you interact with stolen land in that part of our history, but that's also handled, like, it's not, like, ignored. So this feels like a part of history that we never get to talk about with really fun spook elements. And it's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just so fun. I read this in February. It has stuck with me all year. I love the cover. So good. This next one, I only picked up because of my local book club, and that is Night Crawling. This is probably one of the hardest things I've read this year, but it wasn't so depressing that I didn't feel the hope I think the story was trying to convey. So this is, I guess, probably one of the earlier pieces of literary fiction we're going to have from Gen Z. The author was 19 when she wrote this a couple years ago. She is also a poet, and you can definitely feel that in the prose, which means the prose are either going to really work for you or they're really not going to work for you because they're strong. There is a strong voice in this story. I really liked the audiobook because I think that really brought the cadence through, and when you have a poetic voice, I think cadence is important. I think it's more than just word choice, it's also the rhythm of how the words fit together. I loved following this young woman. She's like 17, having to take care of her brother, who is older than her. Their mother is not in the picture, and she ends up doing night crawling, which is selling herself for money so she can get by because she can't get a normal job. The opening scenes are her trying to get a job, and everyone's like, you're not 18. We need a resume. She doesn't have a resume. She hasn't graduated from high school. She's got nothing, and she just wants to work at like a Starbucks, and she can't. And this is like based off lived experiences in Oakland and based off what has happened to women and basically the other side of police brutality to young women. We always hear about other ways that the police misuse their power. This is another facet of it. And there's all of the trigger warnings around this occupation, around her life, around how poor she is, around the struggling. But there are equally so many moments of joy. And these moments, because she's also helping this young man, this young boy who's younger than her, I think he's like 10 or 11 or something, that's in her building, whose mother is also not very in the picture. And, for his birthday, they're trying to make a cake or pancakes. And I remember these scenes where they're together and, they're dreaming. They're always dreaming. Like, yes, there's survival for the sake of survival, but there's also joy. There's dreaming. They play basketball and they love it. And I think this story only works because it has a balance of those two things, because it is striving for hope, because what is the point if you're not hoping to be living, to be content, to be safe, secure, happy, to be with your chosen people? So it's hard. Really, it's short. You will not be able to consume this in a short sitting. I tried. It's just too much. There are scenes that make you weep. And it's not even the scenes where it's like the sexual content or anything like that. Yes, those are hard scenes, but there are scenes that are just emotionally gut-wrenching. And there's scenes that really represent what happened to people, and it sucks. So yeah, that was art. That was good. This next one's definitely was way more fun for me, and that is My Heart is a Chainsaw. This, again, another horror that stole my heart this year. I love slashers. I don't think I realized that till I read this book, but I love slashers. The opening scene of this book is like textbook slasher. And I'm like, yes, give it to me. And Jade, strong voice. Again, it's going to make or break it for you, I feel like. Jade Daniels, she's precocious. She has opinions. She has some self-denial. She has this way of handling the world. Her coping mechanism is very over the top. And that comes through in her internal narration of the events that are happening. She's not a part of the story. She is witnessing the story. That is what she thinks. And so as the story ropes her in, it's really fascinating, the meta of this getting turned on the head, because she thinks she's identified the final girl for the slasher that's happening to her town. But then she keeps getting wrapped up in things like, no, I'm not the final girl. I can't be involved with this. We need to save her. We need to give her the notes so she can survive and save the town. And it was just so interesting. And again, like Lone Woman, I loved how this also interwove heavier themes, not only in community, but in abuse and trauma and how you deal with that. So good. I just bought the sequel earlier today. Cannot wait to read it. I know that has more perspectives, which has me nervous because I do think the strong point of this one was having Jade as just I was with her. But we'll see. I'm excited for it. Number 7 is my romance on this list, and that is Love Theoretically. Listen, any book that makes me cry at 1:30 in the morning and makes me look up the cost of a therapist, it obviously was doing something. It was obviously doing something. This really hit close to home. My profession now is an adjunct professor, which is what the main character in this book is. And unlike other Allie Hazelwood books where I'm just the career part of this is a little odd, I can speak firsthand that we truly do underpay and don't allow for full-time teaching work for people. I'm only doing it because I love it. This character's doing it because she hates it. She's trying to actually get a different job, and I'm happy for where she ends up. But, I'm doing it because, I need to wait for full-time positions to become available, and I want to be teaching. And this is the only way to teach. It's the only jobs that are available. And I can get by on it. But, there are moments where she's trying to get her dream job, and there are so few of them. This conversation about, people are getting PhDs so they can continue in academia, but where? Where are the openings? They don't exist. It's so true. So that was a lot. So if you are similar to me, go in with care. But otherwise, super fun, romance. I enjoyed it. I read it in 24 hours. As I do with an Allie Hazelwood, that's what I want. Met the assignment. Number 6 is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I love this book. I just love Louise Erdrich's words and sense of community. So this is her pandemic book. It obviously has some autofiction elements. I don't think the main character is Louise Erdrich, but the bookshop, the city, what her town went through, because not only was the pandemic happening, but where this bookstore takes place, where Louise Erdrich lives, was a big moment for the Black Lives Matter movement. So she's unpacking that and the pandemic and how it affects this kind of small community, this bookstore community and this family. Our main character had recently gotten out of jail because of a kind of sort of a backstabbing thing from friends, and she was able to get a job at this bookstore. And then we kind of fast forward to 2020, and it's really interesting. I think it really encapsulates a lot of things about the pandemic that I was ready to process when I read this book. And again, just the sense of community, the place, the way that the sentences flow on the page. I just love it. I just love it. So again, another literary fiction hitting the list. All right, so now we're out of horror, we're out of romance. We're going to finally have our first science fiction. Now, I tried to limit series books until I had my series video, unless a particular book in that series was truly like, no, this was like a special moment. And this one's Shards of Honor, the first book that I read in the Verkoskin saga. I don't know if it's the first published book. I can't keep track of publication order of that series. That's beyond me. But this is the first one I was told to read, and I read it, and it gave me that nostalgic feeling of like, I think it was Easter. It was Easter weekend, and we were supposed to go to a family thing, and I was reading this book, and all I wanted to do was finish it, which was like so reminiscent of me as a kid on a long weekend, being like, oh, I have to get up and go do a family thing, but I just want to finish this book. Oh, it was so good. And like meeting Cordelia and Varl, it's just so good. I can't explain it. If you like T. Kingfisher, you have to try Bejeweled. Like, it's not the same, but there's something about both of their writing styles that you're instantly invested in these characters and how they interact with each other and the banter. This is definitely way more like if you like Star Trek and if you're ready for like sci-fi mumbo jumbo stuff. Like, there are definitely some things where like it's easier if you have a framework of science fiction vocabulary, I feel, personally. But for the most part, though, you are meeting Cordelia. She's part of this team that's going to this planet to do just like, you know, explore the planet. And suddenly they run into a group of people who are from like kind of an opposing government. And she ends up stranded with basically it's basically forbidden lovers sort of situation. It's not a romance book, but that's basically what happens. And so she has one of her people who got injured, and then she's with this person who's like the antagonist, and they're traveling together to try and survive. And that's Shards of Honor. And you learn about both of their cultures and their interactions, and it just I can't explain it. I can't explain it, I feel like, in a way that makes it sound interesting, but, like, to tell you I was hooked by chapter 2. I was hooked. I couldn't stop thinking about Cordelia. Like, she's amazing. She's one of the best science fiction characters ever created. Like, you should read this book, okay? And then continue reading Verkoskin Saga, because it's great. So that's why that's on this list. Number 4 is my second science fiction on this list, and last. These were my top 2 science fictions of the year, because, like I said, it was a weird year for me in science fiction. But this is climate sci-fi, and it's a little novella called Arboreality, and I love it. This is actually the winner of the Ursula K. Le Guin Award in Fiction, and I agree. I read this in an entire day on a Sunday, because it's very short, and it screams Angela. It is short story vignettes that are all cohesively tied together around a theme, and like you have character crossovers between the stories, like, yes. It's basically a better form of a book that came out last year. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I'll put the cover here. This book was also short story vignettes with characters that crossed over, and it was about like a pandemic and future problems. I didn't like this book. It was okay, but I didn't love it. It was very readable. This, though, is about what happened, specifically Vancouver Island, but like wildfires are becoming more prevalent, which they are, but like in this near future, to the point where suddenly, where people used to live, people are no longer living. There's actually universities that are closed down. We are needing to figure out, how do we shorten a dark age? How do we save books? You know, like that's like the first scene. And you follow generations of this community and how they change their relationship with the land, how the land changes. And it's kind of one of those climate science fictions that really works for me, because not only is it still staring at the fact that this is happening, this is a real reality, we cannot look away from that, but it's also not that whole over-the-top apocalypse movie, you know, Walking Dead scenario. This is like the quiet survival, and also a quiet survival that has moments of joy, and like there is another side to it, and the other side is not all negativity. It's not all loss. Like, there is loss that is recognized, but there are also things to be gained. And I think that is something that I love when I read this type of climate science fiction or something like that. So really love it. Beautiful cover. Highly recommend. Number 3 is a literary fiction, the highest literary fiction on this list. I thought about putting it higher. If I'm being honest, it's one of the best books I've read this year, and that is Girl, Woman, Other. Oh, so good. I've mentioned this many times when I brought up this book, but to say that I was unwell the week I read this book is an understatement. I really probably needed a therapist the week I read this book, just because, not because of the book, but just like my brain. I don't know about you guys, but mental health for me, when it's really bad, I cannot focus on anything. Like, it's paralyzing to me. I just can't do anything. I can't even, like, turn on the TV to watch something. I'm just like, ah. But I picked this book up because it was just in my hands, and I was getting ready for the train, and I was just trying not to spiral, and it just pulled me in. The prose and the stories, these flawed women that I was following and learning about, it calmed me. It soothed me. It allowed me to escape the spirals. And I appreciate it so much for that, and also just, like, its craft. Again, similar to the last one, it's short story vignettes with connected characters. Like, that's just my thing. Like, I love that. So, basically made for me. I'm even angrier now that I had to share the Booker Award with the Testaments, because I've read both of them. And let me tell you, one is a very good form of art, and the other one is a cash grab. And there's nothing wrong with a cash grab. I just don't know why the Booker Award is doing that. I don't know why it does what it does. This is also a work that was also just fairly educational for me in terms of 20th century UK life for people who identify as women or non-binary from the Black experience. What media we do have in the United States is usually focused about the Black American experience, so that was also very unique and eye-opening, but just like, on a storytelling level. It was really great, really good for a book club, can confirm. These last two are my fantasy books, so, for the most part, fantasy was letting me down this year, but these books were the top, and they reminded me, oh yeah, fantasy is, like, my thing. It's just, like, I need more books to be doing this. And they're both part of series, but these are specifically the books in the series that I'm just like, yes. So this first one is Fool's Assassin. As of filming this, I am only halfway through the third book, but I can pretty much guarantee that even with whatever the ending does that makes people cry and whatever, I don't know, presumably someone dies, I have no clue. Like, I don't know what happens at the end of this book. But regardless, Fool's Assassin was a 5-star read from the jump, okay? From the jump to the end, I could not put that book down. I was physically reading it on the Libby app, which I hate because that was my only option. And I'm just like, this is like the best Fitz and Fool book I've ever read, which I think it will be. That's like my favorite book with the Fitz and the Fool. A, because I like Fitz. Probably B, because of another character I can't bring up, and C, because of a character that's not around that often that I can't bring up. But if you've read the book, maybe you know what I'm talking about. But what I can say is I think I really love this story because there is a lot of handling of change and sad change. Like you have a huge passage of time that we go through at the first half of this book. And then we have to adjust to a new status quo because time is cruel. And the interactions that get to happen between some of our characters after that moment are my favorite thing. I eat that stuff up. And I wish the entire trilogy was about it. Like, truly. And like the end of it, I was on the edge of my seat. It's like, what's going to happen? Everything's so foreboding. And then it has a cliffhanger. And it's like, So it's truly just like so solid. It's why I love to read. Why I love to read series, why I love to read fantasy, why I do love long, sprawling series that you have to get so invested in. Like, this book makes no sense if you haven't read anything else, right? Like, it's so good. So yeah, I predict this will be my favorite book in this trilogy. Even though I'm sure I'm still going to enjoy the last book when I do eventually finish it, which I'm hoping to read it after I film this video while I continue to pack. Because that's what my life is, filming these videos, editing these videos, packing, and finishing up my jobs. That's all I do. I just do that on loop, over and over again. But the last book, if you've been following my channel all year, you probably know what it is. But it's also been a while since I've talked about it. But this is The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. I got to interview Ken Liu this year, which is probably one of my highlights of the year, period, and stop. So awesome. Check that interview out. It has a lot of spoiler-free content, and he is brilliant. Yeah, I just love it. Also, if you want me to do more videos like that, you should check it out, because that tells me people want me to put in the effort to do more videos like that. But this book, again, like Fool's Assassin, like I read the entire Dandelion Dynasty, very 5-star series ever should you read for it, but this book is like why I read this book. So good. The first 300 pages fly by. I'm just like on the edge of my seat, like, what's happening? Who's this character? What are we doing? So good. Like, It's amazing. I really love it. I love how we watch this country grow. I love these new characters. I love the tension. There is a reveal. Like, he plays with subgenres in a way here that is fantastic. It's textbook. Like, there's a moment that feels like first contact with aliens. There are no aliens in this book, but it feels like it. Like if you've watched Independence Day, you're just like, oh man, we are hitting all of these beats. And yes, and it's so good. Oh, so I love that. I love a good academic competition. We got one of those. The characters are so good. We have a character from the first book that has such a shift in this book. And you're like, who are you now? Why do you do what you do? And the tech. It's amazing. I love it. I love it so much. It just works. This is, I think, for most people, the strongest in the series. I still love the entire series, again. But this is the book that was like, so Angela, you're just going to read a book all weekend? You're just going to read an 800-page book in like 5 days? Okay, you do that. And so that's why. It is my #1 read of the year. Just magnificent. Love it. So hopefully you have new books on your radar after watching this video. If you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here, leave like a birthday cake or balloons because it is my birthday. And let me know any recommendations you have for me based off this list so I can start curating a potential TBR for next year. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.